say some orienting remarks?
Yes. So I'm Eliza, and I'm currently affiliated to the ICS, the Institute of Classical Studies in London. But of course, now I'm back home in Germany because we are in quarantine and lockdown. So I'm currently in this afterlife of the PhD students, as I like to call it. That's the start to say. I would say, first of all, I really like to express my gratitude to the ReMeDHe board members for choosing my project. Also considering the high quality of Shuli's project. So, and a special thanks, it must be said, goes to Christy and Judy for taking care of all this and making this really happen. And also, I would like to thank all of you for showing up today, tonight, this afternoon. I don't know what time is it where you are. For some of you, it's really ridiculous and challenging time. So, Jonathan, for example. So, thank you very much. Now, I think I shall say a few words of introduction and try to keep it short and sweet. Probably to start by saying that I read the whole manuscript again after 6 or 7 months of mental distance. And apart from finding typos still, which is very annoying and for which I beg your pardon, but I really attempted to look at the material with a fresh eye, if possible, like an external observer. And I came to the conclusion that if I were to distill the essence of this project, I say that it is about stories of women's body, stories of women's sexual and reproductive body into the cultural context of health and well-being in the 6th century Christianity. And for me, the key word here is really well-being. So I try to look at stories of women's physical, emotional, mental well-being in relation to sexuality and reproduction, but also beyond that, which brings me to two considerations. One is, I reckon that the current title is not working for a book, but it is also why I think it was so important to me I really sticked to it. So important to use the WHO working definition of sexual and reproductive health for the dissertation title. Because I really wanted to make it clear that I'm not interested in talking about sex. So I'm not interested in talking about sexual practices. I have nothing against sex, but I want to talk about the other side of it, so the well-being thing. And I think that which brings me, I think, to the main research question of this dissertation, which I think is, what do actually medical narratives of women's sexual well-being, have to do with hagiographical narratives of penitent prostitute and, female martyrs? Well, the answer, which is also, for me, the main outcome of this project is that, and also to my surprise, I may say, because when I started this project, it wasn't really, the outcome wasn't really forcing. I just thought I saw a pattern, and I said, let's go down this path and let's see where this path will lead me. So I think the main outcome is that stories told of women in medicine in the 6th century reflect the same discourses possibilities that hagiography did. And these stories are essentially about women's body. And because they tell us, about the male-based conceptualization of a women's body, and also about women's own concept or conceptualization of their body, that defined, and I think this is the crux, that defined the agency and the identity of these women as socially usable in terms of wife, mother, chase, but equally as religiously usable. As for the martyrs, in terms of bride and soldier of Christ. So as a final note, I'd like to go as far as to say that this narrative is my, one of my latest reflections. They help us to investigate them beyond the limits of history. So in my case, beyond the limit of 6th century, because they allow us to investigate them from a bioethical point of view. I mean, they tackle issues of sexual violence, well-being, sexual right, whatever, that are really, resonating with our modern public today. So from a point of view, a bioethical point of view, but towards, and I think what concerned me, towards a history of global health. And I think here I stop, and I'm really looking forward to hearing what you think.
Thanks, Eliza. That was great. All right, Julie, do you mind starting us off?
Sure, yeah. Am I properly unmuted? It looks like yes. Okay, great. Yeah, thank you so much. I really enjoyed learning from your project, and I'm really excited that now when EDIUS makes very occasional cameos in my work, I can point people to your work for some up-to-date information, which is great. I'm going to comment on just briefly on my experience overall as a reader of your argument, and then say a bunch of really short, brief things on some other areas that felt like somewhere where I could just raise food for thought. So on the argument reading, the things I especially, let's see, I'm gonna look up, that's gonna help, okay. The things that I especially appreciated about your argument were that you're highlighting sources' omission or recognition of women's sexual and reproductive well-being and agency. I thought it's a great heart of the project. That you bring multiple disciplines to bear on this is super exciting for me. And that you emphasize that the conclusions have to be complex. That Byzantine cultural approaches to women's health and sexual desire and autonomy are going to compare with previous approaches in complex ways. It's not going to be simple. It's not going to be super easy to summarize. So that being said, I did have some trouble holding the pieces together mentally, especially early in the project. This is largely because I'm a reader who needs a lot of orientation and mapping before I go along on the ride of somebody's analysis, like in a chapter. So when I was trying to make sure I was keeping straight the really complex set of what's changing, what's contrasting, what's a continuity, it unfolded. You were gradually identifying all those things, but for at least me as a reader, I needed more previewing sooner or some extra connecting of dots at some points in chapters, I think. Yeah, I think that's all I'm going to say about that overall need on my part. Couple quick comments on audience. I think that you're exactly right about the material being able to appeal and be accessible to readers of multiple levels and multiple fields. Reading as a religion and theology person, I had a few ideas for how you could nuance statements about what's in the Bible and possibly adjust tone in a few passages with religiously diverse readers in mind. So I'm going to put a few things about that in my written notes, and then take it or leave it. You can see if the ideas I have fit your aims well, or are just sort of missing the mark of what you're wanting to do. A few thoughts about terminology, and to answer one of your cover letter questions. I, for one, think that yes to giving at least a little accounting or defending of the categories that you're choosing, especially if we're going to use modern ones for pre-modern material. I think that it does make sense to do a bit of explaining about what your categories are. Our overlapping interests, the things that I think you and I share as interests, raised some questions that I struggle with in my work. I was thinking through, do we each trouble the gender binary enough before starting to talk about male or female anything in the singular? So like female desire, the female brain, biology, male control. That's something that's always a question or issue for my work. So it was on my mind while I was reading yours too. And also how to be obvious enough about when we're each inhabiting and explicating the sources categories versus offering some of our own categories or evaluation. I had occasional moments of uncertainty that remind me of uncertainties with my own sort of ways of expressing things. On the term asexual, so this is like narrowing down to super specific terms. The term asexual, I was thinking about how asexuality is becoming prevalent among today's identities. And I wonder if it would be clearer and more precise to favor some of your other alternatives over that term when you're touching on these really important things about ancient renunciation and moving beyond gender. I really liked phrases like ascetic desexualization, non-sexual women. I think you said something like genderlessness at some point, and all of those resonated a lot with me and with the things that I try to analyze too. So I wanted to highlight how effective I thought they were. And FGM, if you do end up deciding to talk about FGM, I have some thoughts about possible benefits of terminology like genital cutting instead of mutilation, or just expanding your notes that you attach with that part of it. I can tell that you know about a lot of the issues that are wrapped up or that like complicate the terminology choices that we make. If it feels important not to opt for a gentler term, you still might consider flagging the issues a little bit more for unfamiliar readers. So if you do keep it in the project, that was my main thought. I'll share some short notes in the written content on things like updating the term monophysite to miaphysite for that branch of the Christian church. And I wanted to say that your discussion taught me that I need to get a lot more precise in my language about fertility. So thank you for that. That was really important for me to learn, because I'm like finishing a book manuscript where I throw words around about that and I didn't know what I was doing. So very last thing that I wanted to touch on is I was thinking a lot about what it might look like to integrate a bit more pre-6th century Christian material, or to do that in a little more thoroughgoing way at times for your claims about contrast and continuity. But a lot of others here today can speak to that too. So I'm going to stop right there and say thank you again for sharing your work with me. And anything that you want to ask or comment back about, we've got a little window of time now.
Yeah, Eliza, did you want to respond or have any clarifying questions either to Julie or to the full group?
Well, thank you very much. Maybe two things. So one, thank you very much. One, you said that you have some idea about some example from the Bible. That would be great for me, because I'm thinking as well about more examples from the Bible. So it would be benefit me enormously. I like to point about the asexuality. So for me, it was important to use this, the Greek idea of alpha privative. So what something that's not sexual. So there was the reason why I put A as an / sexual. And I'm thinking as well too, I'm re-elaborating this paragraph as the idea of the behavior adaptation. So it's still in my mind. I'm figuring out how to say that. So thank you very much. As for FGM, that was something I want to say, because in my original draft, there was 2 pages or 3 pages more, also parallel to the modern time. But one of my external examiner thought it wasn't a good idea. So I don't know. So in this country, so in England we do. Well, it's not in this country now, but you know what I mean. So in British system, so you have, I got minor corrections. So it was like suggesting what to do, and they really, well, it was made clear to me. It's better if you just cut off now these 3 pages, but they were very important to me. That's why they were, now emerging into an article. But it's, it's interesting to me now even more that you as a reader, so you do think, well, you know what, I would have appreciated some parallel. That's what that makes it all more confusing in a matter of sense. And then the other side is like, in the end, probably it's down to me to, decide. So, but thanks, really, thank you very much.
Molly, shaking your head, so it seemed like you might have views about the FGM as well.
I can't see Molly, that's why.
Oh, hi, am I back? I'm here now. Yeah, I'm completely in agreement with Julia here. It's one of the transition moments coming from dissertation to book is that it's your show now. You don't have to please those 4 or however many people on your committee. You're free. Do what you want. And I think that something I kind of got reading your manuscripts is I felt some tension between you and committee members. Like it felt like some of what you were doing, yes, because we've all been there, right? That's the dissertation experience. You don't have to do that anymore. So I completely agree with Julie. I enjoyed those parts. I wanted them to be there. I don't think it's responsible to discuss clitoridectomy without bringing up FGM, and I'm going to anticipate my comments later. I'm so sorry, this is long. But I think, too, you, in a footnote, mentioned intersex people in the context of a citation. I think that should be in the main body of the text. It should be brought up early, and it should be integrated in your discussion. I felt like you wanted to do that, and I support you. On behalf of the intersex readers, too, because this is about inclusivity as much as it is accurately representing your texts. Right, so I have more to say later because that's my job, but I just wanted to pat you on the back and give you an atta girl. Do that.
Great. Yeah, I had the same impulse about intersex too. So I think we all, the readers, are agreeing with you, and maybe not your dissertation committee. Anyone else want to piggyback on anything that Julie said?
Could I jump in? Yeah, with the FGM stuff, I thought, since it was so thorough and since it gave such a broad historical survey, I mean, even past the 6th century, you started to get into the 7th century and Islamic medicine. I felt like some of it would be better as an article, and then if you do include it in your book, you can just cite back and say, "See my discussion here," you know. But it sounds like you said you were turning it into an article already, so I look forward to reading that.
Anyone else? Julie? Any last?
No, I like hearing the piggybacking, and I want to hear other people chime in, so thanks.
No, if no one else, we can move to Brenda. Okay, go for it, Brenda.
Okay. So first I'll start by saying that I wrote everything down for you, which I will be sending to you, so you don't have to worry about, you know, everything exactly, writing down notes and whatnot. I will also say that I thank you for the invitation to participate in this, even remotely, and the platform is providing me with captions, which is helpful because this sort of form of professional life doesn't work for me with a hidden disability. And because of our subject matter, it's giving me incredible captions. So I'm not sure how much back and forth I will be able to participate in, but we'll do our best here. So I want to start with a caveat. Your manuscript is interesting, it's informative, and it's important. Anything that I offer to the discussion is meant to indicate my positive support and to enhance what good work that you have already done. Anything I suggest is merely an opinion. As Molly noted, you're not a student anymore, and you only have to answer to yourself, and I suppose editors, but at the end of the day, you can ignore them too if you want, you know, whatever helps you sleep at night. So what I thought I would do is I want to address specifically what I was asked to do, and then also your questions. So what I understood the argument of the book to be, and I'm using layperson's language, is that ETS is a gynecological game changer, and that this is evident in 6th century hagiography and martyrologies. In terms of strengths and contributions of the piece as a whole, I think there are 3 strengths and contributions that I've identified, and one is the medicalization of St. Mary of Egypt's ascetic endeavors. I think that the chapter on desexualization is a great contribution. A second strength is the highlighting of menopause as something that is worth analyzing in late antique, early Byzantine source material. And I had to just set down the manuscript and sigh a sigh of contentment that anyone was even recognizing the most invisible portion of the population of women. And then I think a third contribution is that you've provided a fascinating exploration on female health, and you've excelled in professional treatment of some very difficult material. So in terms of the specific questions that you have, shall I delete the description of the WHO categories? My answer is no. I thought it was fine and I thought it was necessary. Your analysis of late antique texts is dependent on contemporary understanding of terms like well-being, terms that, and Susan Holman can address this better than I can, but I just can't imagine John Chrysostom talking or being concerned with well-being as we understand it, right? And so I think this is one of those times when those caveats are important. So though I'm saying I think it's fine and necessary to use those categories, I think you might want to reflect at a slightly greater length on the limitations that those categories and methods present when applied to texts written by those who likely would not have thought about them the way that we do. As some additional comments on the intro, I would weave the 4 research questions that you seek to address into prose rather than as a list. You can list them, but it's just homelier for the eye, I think, for the reader. And then I have a few other sort of little detail-y kinds of things that are less interesting. You didn't ask for specific questions on chapter 2, but I would like to be bold and point out that one thing that you wrote on page 49 was, but as of yet, no one has built on methodology and conclusions of these studies to use medical and hagiographical texts as data for cultural contexts of women's bodies and sexualities. And I happen to know personally an author who has done that. And here's her book. And I'm happy to send it to you in a PDF form if you want, but it might be useful for you. And I have an article too. So that
would be a good idea.
It might be helpful for you. Chapter 3, menopause. Let's talk about menopause. Is the concept of menopause as premature aging well explained or misleading? No, it's not misleading, but I would love to see you expand that section, especially since you're using WHO categories in light of contemporary medical understanding of the onset of menopause and how it is supported in the text. Additionally, I do have a question for you. Is it worth considering not just menopause as that which Mary is experiencing, but also maybe even, dare I suggest it, perimenopause? Medically, this perimenopause can be just as challenging, if not more so, for women, and includes, to your precise point, a lessening in sexual drive due to the decrease in estrogen and loss of sleep, which I think is an interesting sort of link with sleep as a standard method of ascetic activity. Am I out of time, Christy? Should I stop? I have a few more.
Go ahead. Just go
ahead. Okay. So I'll just I think just say a few more things about chapter 3. Okay. I really enjoyed, obviously, I've said this a lot, your take on Mary of Egypt's ascetic endeavors. I think you've done something interesting and unique. This is a text that I regularly teach and regularly teach to nursing students. So I'm going to be sort of poking the bear a bit on this to see if they come to some of your conclusions. And I look forward to being able to assign your chapter when that's available. I have to note my appreciation for your careful and detailed exploration of how the term prostitute is functioning in the text. I think that your analysis actually invites us to rethink holy harlotry apart from Mary, and maybe think about that alongside other figures in hagiography. I'm not sure that I agree that Mary becomes an image of spiritual sexual attractiveness. Although I would not disagree with the notion that this beautiful story does function as something of a romance. This is not a disagreement that I have based on personal piety, and perhaps I'm naive, I'm likely naive, but I do read and I do kind of sense, and I know sensing something about a text is very unscientific, but oh well. I do sense a strong affection between them, to the degree that it does operate in my mind like a love story, but I guess I'm just not quite convinced that Zosimus sees her as an object of sexual desire. And I don't, first of all, I could be wrong. And also, I don't know how important, that is to you for that chapter. And then the last thing I just want to say is, when you ask, would it make sense to add hagiographical material from the 7th century to enlarge the focus? I agree with Julie's comments about a little bit more foregrounding. I think if you were going to go in any direction, I'd go backwards, but backwards in time. But at the end of the day, if you want to keep it tightly confined, it's your project, it's your manuscript now. And so you confine it to the degree you would like, you expand it to the degree you would like. Do you want to spend more time on it? That's your decision. So yeah, thank you again for the opportunity to read your excellent work. It's exciting. I think you offer a new way of looking at some important texts. And I will email you this.
Thank you, Brenda.
Anyone want to piggyback on any of the comments that Brenda made? If not, let's go to Molly.
All right. Hi. Can we hear me? Fabulous. So first, my two main things that I liked and that are working for me here. First, your range of sources, both in time and genre, is seriously impressive. The fact that you are working with Hippocratic authors and Karaton Greek novels. I think I saw some Roman drama sneaking in there. There's just a dizzying array of genres and sources and historical narratives that inform what you're doing. So I think also from a modern scholarship research standpoint, I mean, obviously there are always more things you could include, but I didn't notice any glaring omissions, at least from the classic side of the fence, which is where I come from. Just a dizzying amount of work has gone into this, and it's really obvious that you have, and the ambition and scope is just really impressive. So you can feel very good about that. The other thing, I really enjoy disagreeing with you. I think we have this notion that to be a good book, you have to be like, yeah, you go. And I wasn't having that experience, and that is wonderful. You made me to sit down and rethink so many things that I had just kind of been like, well, yeah, of course that's what Serrana says. Like, I was sitting here grabbing, in fact, it's still here, so I can grab it, my Serrana Scude back and forth off the shelf to go like, did he really say that? Whoa. And you changed my mind in a couple instances. You've changed the way I'm going to talk about things in a couple other instances. So thank you. I think that, and I'm not going to say what I disagreed with, because I want you to have your opinion, because it was super useful to me. And I think it's super valid too. Like, it wasn't that kind of disagreement. So yay, you've already been really helpful to me, which is, I think, why we write this. Yes, we want to be helpful and relevant, and you've done that. So I have a few ideas about how to make things flow a little better and how to help you bring your voice out from the many voices informing you. Starting with, and this is the big one, and I'm so sorry, this is going to be a lot of work, but I think that things will flow better if you move from medical text to hagiographical texts rather than the order you've chosen for the chapters here. So if you were to begin perhaps with the ITS chapter, then move on to chapter 4, 5, then 2 and 3. I think I have this listed in my notes in a much better way, but I think that's the order I went in. So that you're taking us gradually from here's what medicine says, here's how we see it showing up in hagiography. I think that this will help you be more precise about the reception angle you're working on, about how ideas come to hagiographers, why some of the ideas hit for them, why they reject others. And I think this will also help you think through issues of social class. Laurence Tatelin's observation that written medical sources are very much haute médecine, this highfalutin, fancy, elite medicine. And it's not the only medical system that is available to inform what's going on in our hagiographers. Sorry, I'm chatty, but that's that point. And this is all written too. The other thing that would be good, you spend a lot of time going through literature reviews and kind of taking us through the state of the field on sexuality studies and gender studies. And I don't think that needs to be in the book. That seems like a survival from the dissertation. For a book, you can assume that we know what you're talking about. This will leave more room for you to make more in-depth observations, and I think there's a lot of room for that. I want to see more of the WHO lens. There are points where it's lost for a bit, where I keep looking for it to come in and help you get to your original observations, and I suspect that's due to a bit of shyness and a bit of dissertation dynamic. Lean into that, because your best moments, the ones that really got me excited, were when you were thinking in a systematic way about what is wellness in this social context. You're also at your best when you're giving examples first and then using examples as a jumping off point to explain terminology, and not the other way around. The rest of these are littler things. I agree with Julia that you need to be a little more thoughtful about how you discuss asexuality, because you seem to be talking about both the way other people are perceiving a woman's sexual desirability, but also a person's own experience of sexual desire. And these are two very different things. And as someone who identifies as asexual, I found that a little jarring to read through, because I couldn't tell quite what point you were making at any given time. But I think that's easily fixed with a little time spent reading stuff from the asexual community, and then applying that to what you're doing in the book. And I think it will further bolster your arguments. It doesn't change anything. It'll just make it better. The other thing, and this is a very micro point, you're citing Holt Parker. Because of the recent his recent conviction for an arrest for child pornography, that is an author you may want to consider putting some caveats in when you discuss, or perhaps relying on more recent authors for your systematic basis approaching gender and sexuality in the ancient world. Unfortunately, I'm cut off from my library, so I don't have any great alternative bibliography offhand, but I have some people I'm going to ask and get that to you if you want to use it. And I'm not telling you what to do. It's just, I felt like someone should say it at this point when you can do something about it. And I think those are the big ones. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, but seriously, this is fantastic. And I'm really excited to see what it looks like when it's done. So, oh, I forgot a thing. you promise an edition of ITS of Amida Book 16, but I just saw a table of contents. Is there going to be one eventually? Please say yes. And if there is, I made some suggestions about either including it as an appendix or maybe publishing one, but you are so right. It's needed. I would love to have it. And on you go. But really, really well done. Good job. And that's it.
Yeah, Eliza, did you want to ask for any clarifying questions or respond or start a conversation? We could probably have a 2-hour conversation about how and if to cite convicted pedophiles and folks who, right?
Well, thank you very much for that. About, you know, I need to think about it, really. So I didn't know it, to be honest. When I wrote, I didn't know it at that point. So
well, yeah, like not everybody does, which is why I thought, like, I'm still studying too. So
ignorance probably, but I didn't, you know. So,
yeah, I got it.
So, but please let me know the points, so the focus where you disagree. I really would like to know what is it, because I think it's very important to me to know, you know, if you can write it down, or I don't know. So maybe now it's, you know, it's gonna be too.
Oh, it's fine. The biggest thing is I'm not entirely sure I see where your distinction is when looking at ITS's use of clitoridectomy as non-routine and non-therapeutic. It does seem that he's suggesting routine treatment in order to prophylactically treat what I think you're accurately describing as a cosmetic defect, rather than although I think he does talk about sexual stimulation too. So I don't know that I was entirely convinced by your take that ITS is fundamentally rejecting FGM entirely. But I did appreciate you drawing out the distinction and difference between the way that the Serranus branch treats the topic. That is where you moved me. But I think that's also my locus of confusion and hesitation.
Because I thank you very much for that. I appreciate that, because I do think as well that this chapter, this paragraph, needs more clarification, and maybe it's just I have the feeling that it's just more about to reorganize. Also, you know, table maybe comes later. I don't know. I also needed to reorganize the argument, because one of my external didn't like me the idea to talk about FGM. So that was kind of, you know, just try to fit it for, you know, yeah, for the submission.
And I'd be happy to look at it again if you want other eyes. Like not. I like no pressure to.
No, yeah, something that needs to be more clear also to me, because I don't like the way it is now. So it's definitely.
Yeah.
The only last, there was something I put in here. Yeah. So the point it's very interesting for me, guys, to talk with you, because, you know, sometimes your comments are completely the opposite of what I got from the externals, and so what I felt everything is wrong, and then you say no, actually it's a good idea. So everything when you say that you would have liked to see more about the link to the WHO, so I think the places, so the top way in the dissertation where it feels like something is missing are exactly the places where originally that was my link to the WHO, but I was told that it was misleading to refer to this link in the corpus of the dissertation. So I really, you know, cut it, because in the end, when it's about really to submit, I was, you know, to encourage to say, you know, don't do it, don't start now like a quarrel, because it doesn't make any sense. So that's why it's so precious for me now in the moment, really, all the comments, because it made me, well, you know, think, I don't know, that's a more perspectives, perhaps.
We've all been there. I think all of us have a dissertation committee story that is exactly like that. And I think we're maybe still recovering from it too, yes.
Right. So yes, I'm done, sorry. I'm just, but thank you very much, Molly. It's great.
Oh, thank you. It was a delight.
Okay, I think we should move on to Young.
Hear me? Okay, great. So Eliza, thank you for this opportunity, and to Christy, of course, for organizing this. And let me just preface what I'll say by first kind of mentioning that I'm not really a fully in the ReMeDHe community. I've been sort of following along, of course, and of course many friends and colleagues are within that, but my own research and academic interests don't always intersect with the kinds of conversations and the work that you are all doing, which is brilliant. So in that way, I think my reading of your thesis will offer you a nice perspective as a kind of outsider. So I'll start by saying that the thing that really got me excited as I was reading your thesis was precisely what others have been saying, is that the idea of taking the World Health Organization sort of definitions and descriptions of what constitutes sexual and reproductive health, I think that's what was really interesting to me. And I think it also has a great deal of potential of making your book more widely interesting than to just within, let's say, our community of scholars. One thing that I think you could do with that WHO definition, which is something you may have done and just taken out because of the advice of others, is I would really like to see how the definition that is sort of on the web page now, let's say, how that itself may have changed over the decades since the establishment of the WHO. Only because I think what you really bring out well in your discussion of ITIS is that there are sort of changes in how one or a community or a tradition defines what is well-being. And so to see that there's a certain instability in the modern working definition of, let's say, what constitutes well-being, that 30 years ago, what we would have said may very well be very, very different from what we say now. I think that would offer a nice, interesting parallel to what you already do in your analysis of ITIS. Someone already mentioned this too, but because of my excitement over the WHO sort of definition, I get a little lost in the heavy analysis in the hagiography with the connections that you lay out in terms of your methodology in the introduction. So what would really help would be some occasional signposts as you're talking about your analysis of what Mary or the other martyrs, where your working definition becomes is sort of highlighted as you're doing your analysis. I think that would help me as a kind of outsider say, here she is, really building on the methodologies that she laid out in her introduction. I'm going to offer two potential further areas of exploration that may or may not help. It's entirely up to you. But I really echo some of the other comments that suggest looking back a little bit further may help you round out your overall painting of this picture of 6th century Byzantium, late Roman Empire. So one area, and this is something that I work on and I know very well, is sort of thinking about heresy and heresiology. If hagiography is a genre that presents sort of idealized pictures of Christian saints, then heresiology can do the opposite. And in fact, I think there are there's material that you could look at where heresiographers write about sexuality and behaviors within a particular heretical community that will help you, I think, again, think through how perceptions of what is considered sexual normativity are either changing or rhetorically manipulated by heresiological writers. So I think that would be one area of potential interest where you could go back into the 5th and 4th centuries. The other thing that I wonder if you would be interested in thinking about is, the 6th century disputes over Mary Theotokos, and really theology of the body. And again, I don't know how interesting theology is to your potential readers, but the debates about the body and in particular the incarnation, but also specifically Mary, the mother of Jesus, that too may be some fertile, that's bad pun, but fertile ground for you to think about, again, some of these developments and issues that you're looking at in the 6th century in the hagiographical sources that you analyze so well. So those are my main kind of areas of potential further exploration, but also just I want encourage you and affirm that it was a really interesting read. And of course, you're gonna get comments from every direction, and some of them will be diametrically opposed, as you already realize. But again, affirming what others have said, this is you and your project. And so how you want to present your research, that's where the buck ultimately stops. And so I hope you really gain that confidence. And that was something that my dissertation advisor had always tried to instill in me, that I struggled with for many years after graduating, was you are a scholar. You're here, you've made it. So now your voice, I hope, will really come out in your book project. Okay?
Thank you.
Great, thanks, Young. Anyone else want to piggyback on any of Young's comments? Or Eliza, did you want to reply?
Can I ask something? I would like to comment about the evolution, so adding something about the whose definition, how the who definition changed over the year. So, and I think, it fits with my current idea, what I said, that I think that this narrative helps us to investigate the story from a bioethical point of view. And I'm using, on purpose this term, and I'm aware that it may be a very controversial for somebody, especially from this side of the world. Mm-hmm. But what I mean towards what I meant at a global history, so a history of global health, let's say. But now my question is, how would you, or where would you add this chapter or this paragraph in considering the layout that my dissertation or the book has now? So I wouldn't know how to. Should I put it in the introduction? Say, look how it is, or
Heidi, do you have?
Yeah. All
right. I'll just chime in. My impression, and I'll give you some other thoughts later if there is time, about restructuring. But I actually think that you introduce your dissertation at least twice. Once in the introduction and then also in chapter 2 quite extensively. So I think that you need to think about combining those two into a new introduction, especially in light of what you may or may not end up doing when it comes to the book. But I read a lot in chapter 2, especially pages 49 to 53 in that area where you're using the language of an introduction. And so I think you'll have plenty of opportunity to figure out where you might want to, eliminate repetition between those two places, and then bolster also your discussion of your terminology.
Great. Anyone else have suggestions? Yeah, Candace. You hover over the bottom, a bar should come up, and then you can unmute.
Might be a connectivity issue here.
I see Young again.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes. All right. So I had a question, and this might help in the this question of these discussions where you want more information. Do you have a sense if you're going to have footnotes or endnotes? Because sometimes what I wanted when I was reading was an explanatory footnote that really took me through the history, which may have been tangential to your discussion, but would have been really helpful for me who maybe wasn't, say, well versed in why perhaps we use certain terms today versus how they use them in antiquity or something like that. So I did wonder if you had any idea about where you stand on the footnote endnote, because that changes. Because if it can be at the bottom of the page, then I say go for it. If it can't be, then you have to be, I think, more strategic about which terms you introduce and how many terms you introduce in one section.
I'm team footnote.
Yes, me too. But also, I'm team explain things in the body,
Yeah.
definitions and categories. So
yeah.
I really love this idea. I think this would be such a sexy introduction to do a sort of genealogy of WHO categories as an entry point into the dissertation, because it really plays up the strength of what you're doing. It's such an innovative analytical frame that it kind of punches readers right away with this exciting new thing that you're doing, but it also, I think, will pay off for you in the later analysis. So I like it as a rewritten introduction, and I can't remember who said it earlier. Most dissertation introductions are just proving that you've researched the literature, the previous scholarship, and that just most of that needs to go. So I think for all of us, for every dissertation. So I think it would be a much sexier way to open the whole book. Anyone else want to jump in with preferences? Susan, yeah.
I just want to add, yes. I think that you need to be more robust in the beginning. I'm just affirming what others have said. So be much more robust about the WHO category, unapologetic about it, clear about then versus now, the differences. I mean, just go forward in terms of this is what I think is important. This is why it's important. This is why there are all these concerns about connections. But then don't stop there. I mean, you need to set people up for that. But then throughout the dissertation, throughout the book, it needs to come up again and again, maybe even in little bits and pieces. You need to show how this fits into this topic and that topic, because otherwise it's going to seem out of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we should probably move on to Jonathan, unless anyone has a burning desire to say anything else. Okay, take it away, Jonathan.
Sorry.
Okay. Well, I think the most valuable comment I can make is to say, pause the recording right now. Just go back and listen to everything that's been said already. Again, I have very little to add, except to say that I think, first of all, it's been a real joy and delight to see this project take shape since 2017, when we presented at NAPS and we first got to know each other, and to kind of see you work through this and to see what's come out of it. It's really exciting stuff. I think when this becomes a book, it's going to make some really valuable interventions in a couple of different fields. And I think this takes me into, what is the great strength of this project? It's something that I think we're all talking about, but in different ways, which is that you were attempting to do the really hard historical work of bridging ancient texts and modern categories. And that's simultaneously extremely exciting, because that's exactly what we want to be able to do. We want to show how antiquity can matter in contemporary discussions in health and medical humanities, but we also want to be true to the sources. We also want to be historically responsible. And I see you trying to navigate that, and actually I think successfully navigating that, which is unusual. And so this is what I want to see more of. So as others have said, the WHO categories not only have to be there, they have to, I think they're integral to how you're approaching this and why this is going to be a contribution to the field. So I would like to see them fronted, their history explored, and the rationale not just asserted, because I hear you say several times, this provides a good angle. It's not just distorting, but I'm not quite sure why that's true. And I think unless you can explain what sort of angle they are giving on these texts and where the limitations of that are, then it's going to remain a bit of a question. So the WHO categories have both descriptive and prescriptive elements, don't they? They want to talk about safeguarding human rights for all. I don't think our sources from late antiquity would care about that or even have such a notion, right? So this is an element of discontinuity, which can be just as fruitful in reading the sources as the elements of continuity. And so I'd like to see you kind of theorize how you're using the WHO a bit more, but then definitely come back to that over the course of it. I like everything that's happening in the book. Like I'm really excited about it. It's raising questions, but I do find it a little hard to follow as it stands. And so I'm gonna kind of piggyback on, especially what I think Molly was saying in terms of reordering some of the chapters. And as Heidi noted, chapter 2 kind of redoes the introduction. I would just cut it. Whatever wasn't in the introduction gets pushed in there into an expanded and yes, fair enough, Christy. Good point. But anyway, I would cut chapter 2, move it into the introduction. Chapter 4 joins chapter 1, so you have all your Aetius material together. So we don't just get an introduction to his text, but to what he's doing, what his own interventions are. Right? And then you can test case it out on the hagiography and the martyrologies. To me, that would be very easy to follow, and I think still very provocative and exciting. For me, the other thing is I get lost quite easily as a reader. And so I would find more signposting and section titles, perhaps within chapters, very helpful. So for example, your section on FGM, once I figured out why I was there and where I was, I thought, yeah, this is really good. But it was as though I'd gone down a path and I didn't realize where it was going. And then all of a sudden I'm in a very different place. And it took me a while to kind of reorient myself. Whereas a section title would have allowed you to make that transition very easily and your reader to make the transition with you. I think to affirm keeping it in, but just helping your readers along, assume that we're easily lost, because some of us like me are. That would be my biggest suggestion in terms of organization for this. The other angle, if I can come at it from, is maybe more a philological angle, which is to say that the attention you give to the text of Aetius is incredible. You have collated manuscripts, you've put together a text. And that's really an outstanding level of work. I don't see the same level of attention given to the life of Mary of Egypt or the Syriac martyrologies. You rely on the Patrologia Graeca for Mary. I get that. We don't really have much else. But it would be good to see kind of some of the attention to the text, the same level of care for the text and its history applied to the hagiography as is applied to the medical literature, so that evens out. To me, it felt a little uneven. And I can send you some suggestions on maybe how you might want to do that if you want to do that. But I think it would only strengthen and add to what is already a very strong project. And then finally, just a second, Molly's request, can we definitely get the text of Aetius either as a separate edition, which I think would actually be a really good idea, or, well, no, and and a translation, because I bet you've got a translation that you have made, that you've undoubtedly prepared for yourself. Put that in as an appendix. I love having text to work with and being able to flip back there so that it'll make your really intricate discussions of IETS so much easier to follow if I can then just go read. Just flip back a few pages and go, oh, yeah. For me, that's really useful, and I would love to see that in. I think it would also be a good selling point for a book, is to say that this provides a translation of IETS Book 16. Those are a few thoughts for you, but overall, really fantastic work, very exciting.
Thanks, Jonathan. Eliza, did you want to respond, or did anyone want to piggyback?
Oh, I agree with more or less everything. I also agree, and fair enough. I need more, my biographical text needs more philological attention. It's very true. It's just, yeah, it's just the way it is. I think it makes a good point. And also, I understand the signposting. I understand that I need to, to guide the reader, read more, like that. I was a bit, in the end, I end up organizing the chapter the way they are at the moment. Because I was afraid that putting like medicine first and epigraphy afterwards would have, result in two blocks. And what do the two blocks have to do with each other? That's why I think what I said at the very beginning of that, I reckon that the main, the research question for this book is what do actually, medical narrative have to do with epigraphy? Yeah. But I do like the idea. I think that's also, an introduction, putting introduction and chapter 2 together and using, I really love, so thank you very much, to the idea of genealogy. So the evolution of WHO, I think is going to help me to bring them all together and maybe to be less afraid of speaking out what I think. Right. So thank you, Jonathan.
Well, and just to say, along with everyone else, your two examiners, for all intents and purposes, they're gone, right? You get to say what you want to say to a whole world of readers who aren't going to pass or fail you. They're there to read, to learn, to disagree, to spark a new conversation. And so you should, in the words of Outcast, come provocative. You need to, yeah. So, Andre 3000, I think. You get to say what you want to say, and it should be something that takes a stand and is a bit more dangerous than a dissertation can afford to be. So please do.
I like the way, Jonathan, you just said that it's more dangerous than the dissertation. I feel like the dissertation is trying to accomplish something. They're testing you on your expertise, and the book is trying to accomplish something else. It's to start conversations and be exciting and lively. And so I think you can feel free, not just, rejecting them, but seeing this as a different beast. This is it trying to do something different. Anyone else want to jump in?
Can I just add one thing? I know people have made comments about the way that you've structured your chapters. And of course, again, you'll get a lot of different ideas. I kind of like the way that you did your thesis. It kind of like an ITS sandwich with hagiographical buns. So I like that. I think it worked. But what I would like to see, though, then is, again, where your introduction, let's say if your intro and your conclusion are kind of bookends, that really the methodology that you lay out in that intro does come out more in the hagiographical sections, if that's how you ultimately decide to structure your book. But that's just one opinion. But I thought I would say I quite liked the because if you read too much hagiography in a row and about thematically, it can be a little tedious. So having that break where you really do kind of an analysis of a very different kind of text, I thought that was very good. So that's just my point.
Okay, Erin, I think you're up next.
All right, so thank you again, Christy, for inviting me to speak, and Eliza for this really interesting reading. And like Young, I do feel like a bit of an interloper here in the ReMeDHe group because I learn from all of you, but this is, my work is somewhat tangential. And I would say, I mean, to echo and sort of not repeat what others have said, for me, I thought the contribution of turning our attention to Aetius was the most important part for me, where I really wanted to learn more. And I think doing more of the manuscript work with Aetius and bringing that out, and to echo Molly and Jonathan, that having a translation I think that's really the heart for me of such a contribution. One of the things I did want to call attention to on that note is that I was very interested on page 39 where for me, as people, if you're studying Christian texts and using sort of medical literature to do that, so often we're reading Soranus and Galen and those who do not identify as Christians. So I think on page 39 at the bottom, you mention how Aetius has superstition. And I'd actually like to know more about where does Christianity actually change what he says or come up there. So I think sort of moving that, expanding that, and presenting what difference does it make to write a medical treatise at this later date, for me would be helpful. In terms of the introduction, I mean, I think, you know, as people have said, I think the dissertation introduction works very differently than a book. One other thing I would just flag is that I hope that as you move forward, I don't think you have to respond to Kyle Harper quite as much. I think it makes it too, I think you have such interesting things that you can say independently that you don't have to tie to his argument as much. So the other thing I would say is that in terms of the hagiography that you look at, one of the things for me that struck me in that chapter, and I think maybe this touches upon the WHO definition that you use, is that to make a comparison and to put medical literature into conversation with hagiography, and hagiography, the authors of that literature have such a robust theological anthropology and prescriptive ideas about the body and what ultimately the body is in light of the incarnation and in terms of the end of human experience, that I think I needed more texture on how that, I mean, I guess their concerns and how that actually fits with medical literature, which has a very different, or is operating on very different concerns. So I think for me, that would be one place where I just wonder, because these are representations of women versus actually talking about women's bodies. I guess that was one place where some of the hagiography, I was just wondering to tie that in a bit more. And I think, I mean, the rest of it I have sort of written out, but I do think for me it was kind of being a little bit more robust about the ascetic nature of the hagiographical text and what is that doing to the presentation of gender, and how does it ultimately fit with the medical literature, which I find, I often try to use medical literature, but I do think sometimes there's a bit of a gap that I needed more connection with. So thank you, and I'll leave it at that.
Okay, and then last but not least is Brent.
Hi. So I want to take too much time. So what I will do is I will start with a few small things I have to add, and then I'll end with what I thought might be my best suggestion, but we'll see what you think about it. So you mentioned at first that you're interested in stories of women's bodies and kind of medical narratives that go along with it. So I was a little confused why you didn't spend a little bit more time on Themison, who provides basically the only case history we have of a woman with satyriasis. I know there's not much there because it's Tylius is just kind of boiling it down, and he doesn't say much, but I think you could maybe spend a little more time on it. And you can also add, there's a there's a case history in the anonymous Paracenus that is, it was removed from the text by the editor before Garofalo, but it seems to be a Byzantine interpolation, maybe, but it gives like another case history of a woman with satyriasis. So you could maybe throw that in or put it in a footnote, and that would kind of help it, getting the story of women's bodies. Another thing is, I think you didn't really mention Aspasia very much. I know you mentioned her as a source, and we don't know much about her, but you brought up Scarborough's theory about Theodora as being kind of a source. But I thought maybe you could have thrown Aspasia in the main text right there, because clearly Aetius is using Aspasia. And so even if we can't get a good answer, I wonder if it's worth asking, what does it mean for Aetius to use Aspasia as a source? How might that have affected his worldview about the role of women in their bodies? Using an actual what a woman thinks about a woman's body. It's so disappointing that we don't have Aspasia, obviously. So we don't know, but maybe it's worth putting in the main text. My biggest point. Hard to follow.
Hold on, you froze for a second. Can you start back? My biggest point.
Sorry,
it was really dramatic.
Yes, please.
My biggest point was about chapter 4. I thought that it had so much expository information that it was a little difficult to follow, and I wasn't quite clear about your argument. So the title was Women's Self-Well-Being in Relation to Sexuality and Reproduction, but start from your first sentences, it seemed to me that you started off arguing that the late antique medicine is a refrigerator idea is wrong, which I agree with. But then you kind of moved to surveying ways in which sexual activity was medicalized, and then you also at the same time analyzed Aetius's intellectual milieu through the way that he's compiling sources. And I thought that was a lot to do at once. And so I think that maybe making the chapter more sound like a survey would better serve you there, and maybe drop the trying to prove Vivian Nutt and all of those people wrong, because scholars are starting to see that Vivian Nutt was wrong, and that late antique medicine's not unoriginal. Only people who haven't read it would say that. So I thought one suggestion was maybe you could reshape the title of chapter 4 to something like Conceptualizing the Female Body, Anatomy, Pleasure, and Reproduction, or more just medicalizing the female body, because it was a little hard for me to see that it was all completely about self-well-being, because you seem to go from anatomy to pleasure to reproduction, at least in me. So that's probably my biggest suggestion. I have some other bibliographical suggestions that I will just leave in the notes for you.
Thank you.
Great. Anyone want to piggyback on Brent, or Alyssa, did you want to respond? Go for it, Heidi.
Could I make an even more radical suggestion about possible chapters or revisions? I'm just going to put this out there in 1 minute. I wonder if you could consider a shorter book with just the conversation between Aetius, medical sources, and then hagiography, because in some ways, chapter 5 could really be a separate article, because Aetius doesn't really appear in it, right? And the argument doesn't quite fit in as well as the other things that you're doing in chapters 3 and 4. So in some ways, chapter 1 would become more of part of your appendix material, or footnotes discussing how you work with your source. Intro and chapter 2 would come together as intro. And then the heart of the project is really chapters 3 and 4, but figuring out how to structure those materials in terms of the conversations between medical and hagiographical literature vis-a-vis female reproductive health and well-being, as it sort of discussed in this array of sources. So that's just a thought for possible ways that you might parse it as you move forward.
Brenda, go. Yeah.
I would like to support Heidi's suggestion also, because in fact, in my notes, I had, which I didn't read because I apologize if I took too much time, that Aetius seems to disappear in that chapter altogether, which doesn't mean, of course, you couldn't force a visit, but the idea of having that as a separate small project might be a great way to turn your attention more quickly to some of the other things that you know you want to address with this. So yeah.
On the other hand, something jumping to mind for me, because I like where you're going with this. The thing that's jumping to mind is how, on the other hand, there's this desexualizing move in 3 and the resexualizing of some of the martyrs in 5. Though I have to say that I wasn't always sure if the stripping was enough to say they're being unusually sexualized. Somebody needs to help me remember, like, do men not get stripped down as much? Anyway, there was some questions for me about that. So I too felt like 5 did something different, and there was sort of an unevenness that could get dealt with by doing the suggestion of focusing narrowly on 3 and 4, but also means sacrificing this really interesting parallelism about the de and resexualizing. So just to name what it is that might be sacrificed, or and I'll give it over to the author to say more about what you actually say in reaction to any of these more radical things.
Yeah, I think you've got options, and it's really more about the choice you're going to make, and then explaining to the author why everything's there or not there, right? It's really, I think you don't have a bad choice. It's just about framing so that the readers know why you've made the choices you did. Heidi, yeah, go ahead.
The other thing is, in that chapter, I see, you have one article from David Frankfurter, but you don't have his one on the something gaze, the prurient gaze. And I think that if you're going to take that last chapter and create a separate article with it, that's somebody you want to engage with, because he talks about martyrologies as opportunities for Christians. Yeah, I'll send you the article. Okay. Opportunities for Christians to get off on watching people get hurt, basically.
Okay, we've got 2 minutes left. So do anyone who's a participant who wasn't a formal respondent want to say anything? Or actually, let's do that first, and then we can see if anyone has views on press's publishing advice.
One thing I noticed, but while I was reading, it came to mind, is that like a lot of particularly the women in the desert are talked about as like dry in the AP and other sources. And so that made me wonder if they're playing with Galenic understandings of women as wet and therefore fertile, and all of these sorts of playing with the humors and what you do with them, and how like you can manipulate them to make your body do what you want, which is kind of a little bit like playing into this idea that people are taking on this like medicalization of like the human body in general into a popular text, but also then using that knowledge as a way to like talk about, oh, this is how you become a female ascetic in the desert.
Anyone else? That's great, Candace.
I wanted to second something that I think was brought up by Julie and then later Molly, and then maybe Jonathan touched on it. I think that you're so clearly like well-read in Dean Jones and King and Fleming and everybody that is appropriate to cite. But I think sometimes it kind of obscures the fact that you're making original contributions. So I would like to see their names in the footnotes more often. And so if people don't understand, what scholarship you're referring to, they can just kind of go to the footnotes, because you often like bring up Dean Jones, then King, and then somebody else, and you have 4 people in 2 pages, and sometimes it's distracting to see so many names brought up. So I think if you kind of relegate them to footnotes a little more, your good ideas will just shine through.
Relegate everyone to the footnotes. That's what they're for.
I'm in agreement. Yeah, it clutters.
Okay, so I think let's move on just very quickly about any general publication advice. So I put in, I'm going to send everyone an email after we close out with a link to the Google Drive folder where you can put your written comments. Also in that folder, I've put notes that I took on a publishing workshop that Eric Schmidt from University of California Press did at my institution last spring. And so it's great. It's on how to write a book proposal, how to think about what editors want, et cetera, et cetera. So I think there's lots of really helpful tips there that I wish I had long ago. One of the questions that you asked, though, was about presses, what presses we thought might be good pairings. I immediately thought of Columbia University's Gender, Sexuality, Religion series that I think Amy Hollywood is still editing. That was the first thing that came to my mind. And then also, it seems like a lot of people who are doing work like yours are at Rutledge. So Rutledge also seemed to be a press that would like you. Did anyone else have ideas?
I don't have a press to offer, but I will say, as someone who's worked with Rutledge for a few years, they're really lovely to work with. And I've had nothing but an incredibly positive experience with 2 different editors I've worked with there.
And also, just as we mentioned to Shuli, ReMeDHe will be putting together this series. So yeah, keep that in mind with Rutledge.
I did want to put into the mix, Brill Studies in Ancient Medicine series might be interested in your standalone ITIS if you're looking for a home for that. They tend to be a friendly shelter to specialized textual editions.
That's a great suggestion.
That's a really great idea.
I want that edition.
Okay, so I want to honor everyone's time, so we should probably wrap up. Just a few final announcements. Again, I'm going to send an email out momentarily with some links of where you can send written comments. Please, as we all know, don't share the monograph without permission beforehand. I had one other announcement, but I can't read my own handwriting, so maybe I'll put it in the email. But thank you everyone so much for participating. Oh, that's what it was in the chat. Eliza, there's been a lot of stuff in the chat, so if you want to just cut and paste that so that you make sure you have those comments. That's what it was. Thanks to everyone for the time and the warmth of responding. Thank you so much, Eliza, for giving us such a marvelous monograph around which to talk. We're all just thrilled to have been able to read it in advance and look forward to it coming out. And an A+. And we stand ready as a support team. So if you need more guidance, advice, feel free to call on us. We're your advocate now.
So I just want to say as a final note, you are just wonderful. So thank you. You know, it's really in this situation now where I call the afterlife of a PhD student, sometimes confusing and it's daunting as well. And sometimes you think you should give up. And, you know, you guys give you like a boost of energy. So thanks for your time, because, you know, Yeah, thank you very much. I'm very grateful.
And you energize us too, right? I mean, don't us old people feel invigorated? All right, thanks everyone. Be well. Take care.
Hi.
Bye.
I don't know.
Christine, I will try to make copy and paste. So